What is up, Broncos country? Admittedly, I will say it feels weird not leading off a show with pitter patter because it's not like mainly Broncos. So I will say it feels weird not leading off with your calling card, but I'll leave that one for mainly Broncos. But what is up, everybody? We have a fantastic show lined up for you today, and it's going to be an amalgamation of probably Broncos talk. And there's a certain team that won the championship, a professional championship, again in the local state of Colorado. And should I say in back-to-back years. So in the sense of like you had the Colorado Avalanche and the Denver Nuggets achieve finally the monkey off their back, and they get the NBA championship. The NBA Finals trophy is heading, or I guess they played at home. So it stays home in the mile-high city of where they played the Miami Heat and close things out in Game 5. And before we talk about any of that, though, as you can tell, we have guests in the house. Gage Madrid is in the house, and Amir Farrell of Broncos Avenue, maybe one of the largest growing podcasts that is certainly out there, maybe even rivaling Let's Talk Broncos. I mean, I would dare to even go that far. Like, you know, his podcast, his podcast is shooting up. But anyway, Amir, Gage, thank you so much for hopping in the 5280 podcast.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for having me.
Oh, absolutely. So let's kick things off first, pun intended, with some football talk. There was some news. Obviously, I'm getting ready to leave, for my trip, and literally the Brandon McManus news breaks. But we don't necessarily are going to be talking about that. But then you come back, and the Broncos make the decision to address the pass rush. They address the pass rush with bringing in not Yannick Ngakoue or not Justin Houston. No, they decide to go and find a pass rusher who was within that division, a guy who actually has familiarity with Russell Wilson, and not just any familiarity with Russell Wilson. And I don't mean sacking him in 2022, but I mean like actually playing with Russell Wilson with the Seattle Seahawks. And oh, by the way, when you do even more digging, he was the person that was actually quoted in the Chiefs' win over the Broncos at home, who actually said that if Russell Wilson was healthy in that game, that there was a much larger chance that the Broncos probably going to come away with the victory in that. So just a little, food for thought. And thus that leads us to Frank Clark coming to the Denver Broncos. Gage, we'll lead it off with you, but your initial take on the Frank Clark news of him coming to Denver, basically staying in the AFC West.
Well, when we first got the news, it was before we had gotten the news that Baron Browning was going to be down with an injury. He suffered a torn meniscus. Sean Payton said today that he's going to be going on the PUP list. So there's a chance he could miss potentially some regular season time. Here's hoping that's not the case. But once I got that information, I was absolutely stoked with Frank Clark. And even after I had a second to digest it, because once Baron Browning gets back into the fold, we're going to have a really strong 3-man rotation at edge rusher. Frank Clark, looking over here, during his time with Kansas City, he first was traded to the Kansas City Chiefs in 2019. He spent the past 4 years there, recorded 23.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, an interception, 59 QB hits, and 32 tackles for loss. So the dude is a pressure generator. He was like that in his years in Seattle before that. His best year came in 2018 with the Seahawks when he accrued 13 sacks. He's got that chemistry with Russell Wilson. Spoke very highly of Russell Wilson at the Super Bowl. Again, like Cam alluded to, saying that the Broncos would have had a strong chance to winning that Chiefs game. He kind of had to retract what he said a little bit in front of Chiefs media. It was pretty funny.
Yeah.
But he clearly has an admiration for Sean Payton. He talked about that to Josina Anderson shortly after he signed with the team, that the culture that Sean Payton's building, he wants to help the Broncos get back to the mountaintop. And I feel like if we're going to take away snaps from somebody on the edge, I don't want to hinder the development of Baron Browning once he gets back on the field. So I would like to start rotating Randy Gregory in with Frank Clark potentially, just because A, it would help keep Randy Gregory healthy, frankly. And also Frank Clark can generate some more of that power where Randy Gregory's a little bit more of a speed predicated rusher. So I really feel like Frank Clark's going to complement our edge rush rotation really well.
Yeah, Amir, go ahead.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. Definitely, I would like to. I'm not happy that he's on our side. Obviously, now with the things you heard after the Chiefs game, then you heard him at the the Super Bowl press conference, speaking high on the Broncos, saying that they get things turned around. Just posted on my Instagram one of his quotes after he just got traded. He was on a FaceTime with Josina Anderson, I believe, already speaking high of the Broncos, saying that they can easily turn things around, that this is a franchise that it was just kind of like a head coach away. He was basically saying that if you know football, you know that this team, that they can turn it just like this, a snap of a finger. So to get a guy like that, a veteran on your defense, I've been saying all offseason that the Broncos need to add to the pass rush. Now that you lose Baron Browning, this is an absolute must of a move. So they make that move. I know some people have been kind of toying around with the idea of him being the starter alongside Zach Allen. Sean Payton cleared that up in his press conference today, saying he's going to be at the edge. I wanted that to be the case, and I'm really happy that they're going that way. You can only be excited to see what Vance Joseph's going to do with him here in year one, because the guy's a winner, man. He's got the third most sacks in postseason history. So, behind some greats. So I'm really excited to see what he can do here with Vance Joseph in year one, the orange and blue.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. I'm really curious to see what happens. I will say though, when you get some of these moves, it sort of like begs the question as far as like, kind of what took so long, on some of these fronts, like a guy like Frank Clark, who has the familiarity with a Russell Wilson, and then obviously we hear the stuff about his admiration with Sean Payton. So when you get something like that, it's like, oh, I wonder what took so long, and then it almost wondered with the AFC West. Okay, is it possibly a little bit more of a lucrative deal for him to come here and basically stay in division? But no, it was just really kind of about the familiarity and the fact that the team is a lot closer than people think. And you guys said it. His ability to produce in the postseason is a big deal. Like I think that when you look at maybe his regular season numbers, they're not necessarily like world beater numbers, like but you put them in the postseason, that's usually when you want players to turn that switch on a regular basis, is in that postseason, and Clark has done that like in his whole career. And so hopefully if the Broncos can ride this mile high, pun intended, of everything that's going on and get to the postseason, having that kind of presence on your football team is big. And that's another thing I was going to touch on, is that also, like, this is a continuing theme for the Broncos. Like, so they brought in Samaje Perine, they brought in Zach Allen, they brought in the point I'm trying to get in, because my brain's mud after the 12 hours. The point I'm trying to make is that they brought in a lot of players with postseason experience. Michael Burton, another former Chief. They brought in a lot of players with postseason experience. And I think that the point is that this just continues that trend. This continues that trend of people that can also be able to enforce that new culture that Payton is clearly wanting to establish in Denver.
Absolutely. When you look at Frank Clark's postseason numbers here, 13 and a half sacks in the postseason throughout his career. Again, as Amir alluded to, third all-time in postseason sacks. That is absolutely insane, and that includes his tenure with Seattle. And then when you come and look at his sack totals from the two championship runs, in 2019 he had 5 sacks, and last season it was half of that, 2.5 sacks, but still very respectable numbers in the postseason when it counts, man. So if the Broncos can get over the hump and make the playoffs for the first time since 2015, then having a guy like Frank Clark on the edge who can really be that disruptor and really force teams into uncomfortable situations, especially on third down, that's when I feel like Frank Clark is going to be able to make his hay, is on obvious passing situations, when he can generate that pressure, use that power, use whatever speed he's got left in his lower body, man. I feel like Frank Clark going to be a big weapon for us if we can get to the postseason. But even throughout the season, just aiding us in getting there, bringing us those key pressures on third down that Von Miller was notorious for getting us. I feel like having Zach Allen and obviously having DJ Jones on the defensive line as well, having those guys who can set up stunts for guys like Baron Browning when he gets healthy, guys like Randy Gregory, and then guys like Frank Clark as well. That's going to be huge for us. And Vance Joseph is a guy who was notorious for using those stunts with Von Miller and Derek Wolfe. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to get back to doing that here in Denver with those guys that I mentioned.
Yeah, and another thing we're kind of overlooking is his availability. Like Randy Gregory, Baron Browning, constant injuries the last few years. Browning with the wrist last year. Gregory's been dealing with the knee and the shoulder, and he's finally healthy now. But you really don't know what's going to be next with Randy Gregory. And then, like Gage mentioned, Browning, he's with surgery now recovering, so he's going to be starting off the season on the PUP list. So to get someone like Frank Clark, who not only has that leadership and winning experience, but he's also going to come straight to the Broncos with the ability to stay healthy and be on the field for the team. It's not like it's always going to be production through the sacks. He brings pressure off the edge, and he has the versatility to align in the interior if you want to see what you can get a little bit out of Jonathan Cooper and Nick Benito. So I'm really excited to see what they can do with him in year one. It's one of those moves where where you're getting out of him, what he's going to contribute to the locker room. So really, it's a win-win in my opinion. Like it would be a lose situation if he gets injured, which knock on wood, we hope this defense can stay healthy. But at the same time, I really feel like it's kind of like a win-win thing, because it's $5.5 million for a guy like him who's averaging at least 4 sacks a season the last I don't know how many years, when he's able to stay healthy, and what he does in the postseason speaks for itself. So I think Frank Clark is a very, very good under the radar move this late in the offseason.
Yeah, this late especially. Getting to some of the comments, obviously, Ray, thank you so much for joining us. Avatar, what's up to you? And yes, Nuggets Nation, we'll talk about some of the Nuggets. And John, wishing us a good show. So thank you so much, John. Yeah, I think that the thing that I'm a little bit worrisome of is that knee a little bit with Baron Browning, because knees are always so tricky, and especially with the way Baron Browning is athletically and how athletically gifted he is. I am curious what his recovery is going to be. And then not to mention, let's just say you decide to sit Baron Browning for the entire preseason, and then say maybe 2-3 games into the regular season, and Frank Clark is playing pretty darn well in the first few games of that season. We know football is also a play the hot hand type of sport as well. And so granted, it's kind of like one of those types of situations where you want the best of all parties to be healthy, and you also want to keep the engine running. And so it's it's going to be really hard, I think, and that's the worst, in a case, a worst case scenario for the Baron Browning fans, myself included. But it's just part of me does worry a little bit with that knee and with his bend ability as a pass rusher. So I really do hope that, this knee surgery, the arthroscopic knee surgery that he's having or had, is a good one, and that he can be able to come back basically fresh and ready to go for the start of the season.
And one thing that I feel like that has not been clarified is when he potentially had this surgery, because that's obviously going to play heavily into his return timeline. So the way Sean Payton was talking, they knew about this for some period of time. That's why they went out and pursued Frank Clark. But again, it just hasn't been clarified, as far as I know, when that surgery may have taken place, unless you guys may know something differently.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on the exact time, but I'm 99.99% sure it already happened, probably last week or the week before. I'm pretty sure the surgery's already gone through. So at this point, I believe it's just a recovery thing. But yeah, Mike Kliss already hinted that he's not going to even be back till a limited capacity, even in training camps. At some point, it was his wording. So in my opinion, you're probably not going to see Baron Browning in action till around week 2 or 3, and even then he's going to be a rotational kind of limitation. So I definitely think you're gonna get a good taste of Frank Clark, and like Cam brought up, it's a really good point. They might just be feeding the hot hand at that point, and they want to keep these guys fresh, especially with the injuries that these guys are coming off. Frank Clark is obviously, he's not too old, but he's getting up there in age, so you don't want to put it all on him. So I think they might want to feed a little bit of the younger guys as well. See what you can get out of your second round pick, Nick Benito.
So now diving into the oven, and let's see what's cooking with the running back position, and hopefully we don't piss off Amir too much in terms of maybe addressing the running back position, or certainly the Javonte Williams in the room. But what's cooking? Obviously, the Broncos and the rumors of Dalvin Cook to the Broncos. And this is something that I know, Amir, you are a huge fan of. No, I'm kidding. You're not necessarily a huge fan of the Dalvin Cook idea, but how likely or how possible in a percentage would you guys put Dalvin to the Broncos, as far as like if you were to look at it objectively, if you will?
Amir?
I will say I'm not too opposed to Dalvin Cook by any means at all. He's a very, very talented back. Just the thing with me is like the money. Like I don't want to devote too much of that to this position, especially after the Frank Clark signing. We're around like that $4 or $5 million mark. Could be wrong. So after that signing, got negative 5.5 to the cap space. You can't really give him too much at this point. And like he keeps talking about, we're hearing a lot, at least in terms of the rumors, that he really wants to go home to Miami. But at the same time, we heard from Pelissero on the can't remember what show it was today, but
Was it Eisen?
I think maybe the Rich Eisen show. I could be wrong there, but he was on that show today, and he was basically just talking about how he's not going to rush stuff. He's going to make sure he chooses the best home for him, the team that gives him the most value in terms of showing him that they want him, and showing him that he's going to be that he's wanted there, basically, because he wants to go to a team where he shows that what he can do in the locker room, out on the field, and obviously contribute to winning football games. He doesn't want to go where he's going to be losing. So I think this is in terms of just looking at it, completely looking from the outside looking in, the Broncos are a very, very good fit. You look at what Sean Payton has done with his running backs in the past, the backs that can be very elusive, agile, fast, in open space. Dalvin Cook could bring just that for you. He's had his share of injury concerns, but Javonte Williams is also, recovering from his injury, pretty quickly right now. And so he's not going to be at full capacity right away. But to get a guy like Dalvin Cook, a home run hitter, something the Broncos are kind of missing right now. I think you can make the argument that no one in this running back room is kind of like a down the field home run hitter in terms of speed. You can maybe make the argument for Tyler Beatty, but he doesn't really have a guaranteed spot as of now. While I could see him taking that spot, but Dalvin Cook, it's the money right now. I'm not too sure the Broncos are going to really make that move. According to Mike Kliss, he doesn't really see either.
Yeah. Yeah, Mike Kliss was pretty strong in saying that unless the finances fit in, which to Dalvin Cook's perspective, he's pretty much said that he's not going to take $4 to $5 million. He wants a little bit more financial security than that. So unless the Denver Broncos want to, say, restructure Justin Simmons' deal and maybe clear up some money that way, or maybe just dip into ownership pockets and spend a little bit over the cap if they want to, which they obviously could. But my issue with Dalvin Cook is his yards per carry has decreased by 0.3 yards each season since 2020. In 2020, he averaged 5 yards per carry. 2021, 4.7. 2022, 4.4. Last season, he dealt with quite a few injuries. I believe he dealt with a nagging shoulder injury. That's something I believe that's bothered him for several years now. And then he's had some lower body stuff as well. So for me, it's the money combined with another running back who has injury concerns. I'd almost rather take a flyer on someone like Kareem Hunt at this point for less money. And for Dalvin, I feel like there are other fits out there that make more sense. He's heavily hinted through his Twitter account that he wants to go to the Miami Dolphins.
Mm-hmm.
If you go look at his life, it's all Miami Dolphins stuff. The Bills could also make sense. He could go play with his brother up there, play on a championship contender that really needs to shore up their running game. He could God forbid, go to the Kansas City Chiefs, although I don't really see a fit there with Isaiah Pacheco and Clyde Edwards-Helaire returning. But there are other fits for Dalvin Cook that are not the Broncos. Obviously, there's that connection there with George Payton. He was the Vikings assistant GM when Dalvin Cook was drafted back in 2017. But aside from that personal connection and Sean Payton's history with the running back position, I just don't think financially or otherwise it does make sense for me.
Yeah, and I think that obviously you definitely want to take your time. But I will say it will be interesting if he does take his time and then he still signs with Miami, because it'll be like one of those things like, well, why didn't you just sign there to begin with? I mean, it's just like kind of like when the whole thing began, because like the thing with Miami is like there are definite pros with even going from to Miami. I think that's a little bit better pros from Denver's perspective, a little bit. But to ignore Miami, I think is not a possibility. I think is kind of childish, because Miami has a lot to offer in the sense of like McDaniel and Peyton, as far as like play callers, kind of cancel out. And when you go into the fact that certainly they have a crowded room, but you're going to a team that for all intents and purposes, like the San Francisco 49ers, a team that was originally part of Mike McDaniel, went out and gotten Christian McCaffrey, and that running game for the 49ers has basically taken off since Christian McCaffrey has been with the 49ers. And that's almost like the exact same system, if not a little bit, different in some capacity. But it's just like you put Dalvin Cook there, I mean, it would be a pretty good fit. And then obviously the money side of things, they may give him $4 to $5 million, but we also have to remember there's no state tax in Florida. So, I mean, yeah, so you don't have to worry about that when, you may get 4 to 5, but there's also the tax, of course, that you may be getting if you sign with Denver or, anywhere else. But I mean, certainly, you definitely want to take your time. And definitely from Javonte Williams' perspective, it does allow you a lot more flexibility to give Javonte the rest that he needs. Because, I mean, like, you could give him, not saying they will, but, like, say they do sign Dalvin Cook, you are afforded that opportunity to kind of shelve Javonte for a little bit. And then, depending on, we talked about the hot hand earlier in terms of, like, Frank Clark and Baron Browning, but obviously depending on the hot hand, but, like, a healthier room, if you will, of Dalvin Cook and Javonte Williams is much better of a running back room than certainly Cook and P. Ryan. P. Ryan is a great back, certainly, and they can kind of tote, the rock, obviously, until Javonte comes, back, fully healthy and, truly and can contribute in games from start to finish. But it's just like, it just gives you that more flexibility to truly let Javonte rest.
I can absolutely see that angle of it for sure. That warms me up to the idea a little bit more, just in terms of finding a back who's more capable of spelling Javonte. Because with somebody like Samaje Perine, he said that he's very much that between the tackles runner, and very much like Amir alluded to, what we're lacking right now is sort of that speedy downhill threat. Somebody who can have that threat to rip off a 75-yard run at any time. Perine himself said that that's not his game. So Dalvin Cook, if he can still bring that level of explosiveness, I would definitely be a little bit more warmed up to it. Right now, I feel like I'd keep an eye on Tyler Beatty and as well as Jaleel McLaughlin, the undrafted free agent out of Youngstown. Those are the two guys who bring that juice, that speed at the running back position. Although they're both fairly unproven commodities, if we don't go down the Dalvin Cook route, I definitely would keep an eye on those two players as dark horses to make the roster.
For sure. Well, Amir, you wrote a piece over on Predominantly Orange. Speaking of the Miami Dolphins, by the way, you wrote a piece
Good
over
transition.
on speaking about the Miami Dolphins and a former Denver Bronco. And it was about an appearance that Bradley Chubb, former Denver Bronco, had on Tyreek Hill's podcast, where he did what Draymond Jones couldn't. Am I saying that basically appropriately?
What Draymond Jones couldn't. Yeah.
So, talk a little bit about your piece there, and what you
Well,
kind of found when you did the digging on that.
yeah, so watch the YouTube video. Great YouTube video. Tyreek Hill is an awesome person. He really is. And all the media coverage, by the way, that he like gives us is really cool as NFL fans to see like kind of what it's like to be an NFL player, just kind of be like a regular person at the same time. Like we're all humans. But anyways, he had Bradley Chubb, his new teammate, on the podcast, talked a lot about him being traded from the Broncos, what that was like, how the feelings were. Make sure you guys go check that out in my article at Predominantly Orange. But basically this, I will say, like, and I don't know if I told you this, Cam, actually, but Bradley Chubb actually has me blocked on Instagram, which is, I still laugh at this till this day. I made like a mock trade post on my Instagram like years ago, and I included him in it. It was for Deshaun Watson, and he immediately blocked me. Like all the people immediately tagged him in the comments, and yeah, all you guys that tagged him, screw you guys. But anyways, Bradley Chubb still has me blocked. And hopefully this article gave me some a one up for him anyways. But yeah, that article did really well. And just basically the whole takeaway I got from was Bradley Chubb is a really good man. Like he was very respectful of the way he answered everything. Tyreek Hill even like joked a few times. Like he was like, oh, at least that you got traded away from the Broncos. Now you can stop here. And Russell Wilson say, let's ride around the building. And he was very quick to defend Russ. He was like, oh no, he was just trying to keep us on track. He was trying to keep things going. He was talking about how Russ said, let's ride after we lost like a really bad game. I can't remember which one it was. We lost a lot of bad games last year, but Tyreek Hill kind of laughed about that, and Bradley Chubb was quick to defend him. The whole thing I got from it was he was very respectful of the way not only he talked about Russell Wilson and playing with him and his struggles, but the entire like team and the organization. Like he was very respectful with George Payton. Didn't like throw any shade or any like shots at him or anything. Like he was saying that the Broncos are going to do best for their, what's best for their organization, even if that means moving on from me, who I just made the Pro Bowl a few years ago, and I was just like starting to have a really good start to the season. Because if you guys look at the numbers, Bradley Chubb's like pressures were like way up, like skyrocketed. Like he only had 2.5 sacks last year, and he may have took a little bit of a dip in production when he went to Miami, but he was playing his tail off, and that's why Miami was really, and Chris Greer was really comfortable giving him that huge contract. So I'm really happy for him, the contract that he got. Very just all around class act. That's the best way I'd have to describe Bradley Chubb.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was just interesting. I shouldn't be laughing, but it is interesting when you truly just kind of do a compare and contrast of the Draymond Jones situation and the Bradley Chubb situation, because
they're really good friends too.
Yeah, and so to kind of just see the way that Draymond handled it versus the way Chubb handled it is just, it's interesting, because like Chubb certainly took the route that you would have wanted Draymond to take, so I think that to kind of see where things were with Chubb too, and because like the thing I think that all of us saw with Chubb was you saw like bits and pieces of quotes of like of what happened after the trade or stuff like that, not the whole story. And so to hear something like that, and then of course the quarterback stuff, which you're always going to hear when your quarterback has a down year like that. So, but to hear that was just really really refreshing for a guy like that. So, and I would have loved to kind of hear what he had to say, with in terms of being with Vic Fangio again. So, and yeah, so that would I'd be kind of curious about that. But Gage, what's your thoughts on that pretty detailed quote, if you will?
Yeah. Well, it definitely goes to show that there's still a strong amount of Russell Wilson's teammates that support him and clearly feel like the media narratives out there have been overblown and overstimulated, if you will. And obviously that was mostly predicated on the Broncos having that big national platform. But he talked about how Russell Wilson was always the same level-headed guy. He was never high. He was never too low. And that was part of what it went into that Broncos country, let's ride at the end of that. I believe it was the Colts game press conference there, where he got a lot of crap for missing KJ Hamler. I don't want to go into a completely different tangent on that. I just feel like that was a bad play design, but it goes to show that Russell Wilson still garners a high level respect in the locker room. And then from the angle of Bradley Chubb, it still goes to show that he has a strong level of admiration for the Denver Broncos and how they went about the trade. Although obviously he would have preferred to have stayed here probably. They went about it in a very professional way, and he still very clearly supports what the Broncos are building and who they have in here personnel wise. And it's good to see that there are players out there that still have our back, unlike Draymond Jones. So I have a lot of respect for Bradley Chubb for the way he handled that, because he could have gone on Tyreek Hill's podcast and could have completely blasted the Broncos organization, and he didn't do that. And I have a lot of respect for him for the way he handled that interview.
Well, and I was going to say, with it being Tyreek Hill, like, he could have taken Tyreek Hill's bait. And because Tyreek Hill is also a former Kansas City Chief, he could have taken that bait, and and then Tyreek Hill was just going to just continue feeding that much more, and you were going to get the side that probably a lot of people were hoping to get.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, I halfway expected that when I first saw that video on Tyreek Hill's YouTube channel. It popped in my subscription feed. I was like, here we go. Because Tyreek obviously has that history and that bias against the Broncos, and he was going to probably try to set Bradley up there, but Bradley handled that very, very well.
Yeah, they had trash talk each other a little bit in there. I don't know if you guys peeped that. He was there talking about how when he's saying his biggest regret when playing with the Broncos was not beating the Chiefs at least one time, and they were kind of trash talking each other a little bit. And it's kind of refreshing to see that, because a lot of these guys, they just have that, like, even if they're traded away and everything, you could tell these players want to beat the Chiefs so badly. It's like, well, I wouldn't call it like our Super Bowl or anything, but it's definitely like the biggest anticipated game of the season. We've lost over 15 games in a row to them now. It's just got to come to an end. I'm happy that our leaders really see that, because us as the fans, we want to see that.
Well, speaking of Super Bowl, the Denver Nuggets won their version of a Super Bowl, the Larry O'Brien Trophy. The first NBA championship is now in the Mile High City. The Denver Nuggets are now etched in NBA royalty. Nikola Jokic's season is now completed, in the form of, he didn't get that MVP that he definitely didn't want, but he got the Finals MVP, which matters so much more than the MVP. Jamal Murray was healthy for a full season, and the Denver Nuggets had contributions everywhere, and that's the sign of a really, really good championship team. And so the Denver Nuggets, Amir and Gage, won their first NBA championship against the Heat, actually closing it out in Game 5 at home. How do you guys feel?
Couldn't be happier. I just still at a loss of words, man. Last night was insane. Got like no sleep. Woke up this morning. It literally felt like a dream. Just seeing everything on Twitter, being Aaron Gordon running around in the streets, walking home. That is that absolutely made my entire week. Just seeing Aaron Gordon with the fans going crazy. That's gonna go down in Denver sports history. We're always gonna remember all the fans cheering on with him outside the stadium.
A mini parade before the big parade.
Yeah. It's just it's surreal. We were talking about before we started the show that there's fans doing pull-ups on the light poles. Like these fans, they're crazy. But at the same time, it's like, hey man, at least we're winning championships. Unlike the Philly fans that aren't winning championships and are jumping off of the light poles and stuff. So.
Right. What about you, Gage?
So this for me, I'm such a dedicated football nerd. This is the first year that I've really been drawn into the sport of basketball. I'm not a native of Denver. I've been here for about 5 years now, and I've supported the Nuggets because obviously they're the hometown team, but this is the first year that I've truly sat down and watched this team and paid attention to what they were building. And I will always compare it to football because that's the sport I know. This Nuggets team really reminded me of the Broncos teams 2013, 2014, 2015, where we obviously had those one star where we ran things through, obviously more so in 2013 and 2014. We had that star right here in the Broncos and Peyton Manning. They had that star with Nikola Jokic, but the supporting cast able to pull up and step up around Nikola Jokic, from Jamal Murray to KCP, Aaron Gordon, Bruce Brown, and Christian Brown. I mean, Jeff Green, obviously that veteran mainstay on the team, brought that experience. I know I'm probably missing somebody too, but just seeing the team dynamic that this team had, everybody wanted to win for each other. Seeing that shot of Joker throwing Jamal Murray into the training pool yesterday, that was such a surreal moment.
Yeah.
And obviously, Joker didn't want any of this for himself. He wanted all of this for the guys around him. Everybody on this team wanted it for the guys around them. It was so cool just to see the dynamic and the unselfishness of this team. And it was a really cool team to really become emotionally drawn into the game of basketball with.
You know, and I will say, Amir's gonna laugh. I so badly wanted to smack talk Jordan, but then I completely forgot about the fact that he's not a Miami Heat fan. So but I mean, just because
he's lying. He's lying.
Yeah, but no, it was just it was such an amalgamation of the entire playoff run. And when you think about the game itself in game 5, like it was intense. Like it was super, super intense. If there was one game, and granted they lost game 2 at home, but if there was like one game where you felt stressed, like on the front end to the back end, like that was that game. Because like it truly felt like from start to finish, the Nuggets really didn't have control of that game until the fourth quarter. I will say though, we have to give props to a guy that was struggling the entire NBA Finals, and that was Michael Porter Jr.
That's who I missed.
And that is Michael Porter Jr. He played really well. The stats, the box. If you're a box score watcher, shame on you in this particular game. But it's just like Michael Porter Jr. was. He kept that game afloat about as well as he could, and then it come like the fourth quarter, you started to kind of see inch by inch the Nuggets get that momentum back.
Yeah, he went he went full Allen Iverson with that handle between his legs, the layup that had the stadium roaring, going absolutely crazy. You could tell like late in the game, he's like, "All right, man, I've been shooting very poorly this whole series. It's time for me to get a little loose, play the game that I love, play a little bit freely." And you could tell like his handles in open space, he just looked better because like Michael Porter, everybody knows he's like kind of more of like an off-ball player, like he's gonna catch and shoot type player, and he was getting a little bit more creating plays on his own. So if you're a Nuggets fan and you watched him really closely, that's kind of encouraging moving forward with him as a starting small forward going into next season, seeing how he can improve on that game, just because the biggest issue with him is like he's not really like a huge playmaker, and when he does get the ball in his hands, it's kind of like he's always getting clowned in the comments. Michael, don't pass the rock, Porter Jr. So it's kind of cool to see his game take a little bit of a step, especially in a game that important, the biggest game in Nuggets history. So it was really cool to see.
You can just tell in his body language too, man. He was finally starting to shake those demons off. He was just getting more and more comfortable in his shooting, and you could definitely tell just mentally he was a lot more locked in the clutch moments that he needed to be in that game.
Well, and I think that the important thing that needs to be said, and this is also a testament to like the Nuggets team as a whole, but like a testament to him is that in this final series, he knew he was struggling, and he definitely signed a max contract, but he was content with the fact about Bruce Brown coming in and replacing him, or even a Christian Brown coming in and replacing him, because he knew that that's what the Nuggets needed for them to win a championship. And like, that's the kind of little things that really do separate you on a mental fortitude aspect, that helps you win a championship. Like, so to see that side of it is just one where you knew at some point Michael Porter Jr. was at least going to break through. And I can't imagine like being there in person when he finally hit that 3-pointer, like being at Ball Arena. Just, I can't imagine how I think I was scrolling through Twitter at one point, and they said that was about the loudest, if not the loudest, that stadium had been, until obviously, the buzzer sounded and everything. But like, I can't imagine how loud that ball arena was.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, that just gave me chills. I'm super happy for the guy, man. Like, he deserves it all. I don't know if you guys saw the clip from 9 News, but Michael Malone gave him like a little pep talk after the game, and he was basically telling him about how you shouldn't remember this championship as the game where you were missing shots and whatnot. But he basically told him like straight up, like, you were the reason that we won an NBA championship. Like, you are a huge reason why we were able to come away in this game 5 and be able to be crowned champions the first time in franchise history. Like, you did this, man. Like, don't remember, the downfalls and everything. You just remember the high that we had. So I thought that was really cool. And just shout out to Mike Malone, man. Like, everybody called for his job. Everybody called for Michael Porter's job. Everybody was calling for Jamal Murray at one point. Like, the way we stuck with everybody, and I said this on our show today, the way that the Nuggets built everything, it's the right way you're supposed to build an NBA franchise. Like, and not even just the NBA, like sports in general should take notes for sure. Like, the way they developed, drafted players, the way rookie GM Calvin Booth stepped in year 1, got KCP, Bruce Brown. Like, are you kidding me? Like, they put the right defenders in this team to make, go 16-4 in the postseason, one of the better postseason records we've seen in recent NBA history. So if you're a Nuggets fan, you got to literally feel you're like you're on top of the world right now, just staring down on top of those mountains.
How about this past decade for Denver sports, man? Got the Nuggets and the Avs going back to back. Broncos, obviously, it's been a rough past 7 years, but still won a championship in the past decade. If the Rockies can just get back on track, man, it'll be a hell of a period for Colorado sports.
That might be about 30 more years. They might go on the Chicago Cubs curse before they actually decide to win one.
Yeah, I'm glad I have no emotional investment in that team. Yeah.
I'm glad I'm not a Rockies fan.
Yeah.
Glad I'm not a Rockies fan.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just, it is amazing. You mentioned the Colorado Avalanche. It is amazing the parallels, between the 2022 Colorado Avalanche and the 2023 Denver Nuggets. Obviously, there's a little bit more wiggle room for obviously the Nuggets to stay together than there was, say, the Colorado Avalanche, and making some difficult decisions of, is it Valerie Nichushkin or is it Nazem Kadri, or and in this case it's really, let's try and re-sign Bruce Brown. That's just basically like where things are currently sitting, with the current Nuggets, roster. Cause like everything on the starters, they're locked up. Like, I mean, I want to say it's like 3 or 4 years, if not a little bit more than that. They're locked up. And, but then you go into the coaching part, and that's like truly like where it gets weirdly similar. Like, I mean, you think back to like Jared Bednar being on the hot seat, for the first couple of years, and then even at the midway point of the Avs season, and then once they were getting ready to get into the playoffs, okay, should they like let go of Bednar if they don't make it to the Stanley Cup? And then Michael Malone was exactly the same way. Like, and maybe to a certain degree, Michael Malone was under a little bit more pressure, but still, like, they were both under heavy pressure to perform and really get their team ready. And kudos to the Sacramento Kings for firing Michael Malone after only 3 years, when he had them getting over 500. And then obviously the Denver Nuggets snatching Michael Malone and staying patient enough with him, to truly, grow with this team and develop this team and get that team truly where it needs to be. And it's so funny because I was thinking about it today, how it went from Yusef Nurkic and Emmanuel Mudiay to Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. Like, just goes to show you the growth of it and how quickly it started.
Yeah, pretty big jump.
Yeah. But so for you guys and for the actual Nikola Jokic debate, yes, we're going to have at least, maybe not a debate, but we'll at least talk about it. Does this change, or should it change, the narrative, in your opinion, of how Nikola Jokic is viewed on the national level.
That should have been changed a while ago, honestly. And people are starting to gain a little bit of steam on it. I see some people claiming that he's already a top 5 center in NBA history. Loving to see people already throwing him up that high. If people are still dogging on him, and I can't remember who it was today, I believe, I can't remember who it was in the media, but they're still claiming that Joel Embiid is still a better shooter than Nikola Jokic and actually has a jump shot, and claim that Nikola Jokic does not have a jump shot. Like, what do you even like? It's these analysts that literally have credentials or professionals, went through all those years of college and still do not know anything about the sport. It just completely wows me. And Lisa Salters, I'm glad our fans booed her last night. Absolute best fans in the world. But anyways, if it's very simple for me. If you think Nikola Jokic isn't the best player in the world, then you just simply are, like Cam said, you're a box score watcher. So, and even if you're a box score watcher, you can still make the assumption he's the best player in the world. Like, dude literally averaged a triple-double in the postseason, and he ran through all of his opponents. Like, it doesn't get much better than that. And he has any given moment to carry his team, even if Jamal Murray has a very bad night, Michael Porter has a very bad night. And I understand our roster is very deep, but Nikola Jokic, he is absolutely the epitome of a complete basketball player, and he's a center playing all 5 positions at one time. Like, it's truly remarkable what he's able to do.
You know, there are always going to be those hot take artists out there that make their living on having one set opinion, and no matter how much evidence is presented to them to the contrary of that opinion, they will always hold firm on their original opinion, at least on the record for the camera. And I still see certain individuals doing that with Nikola Jokic. I saw Nick Wright, I believe, eating some crow earlier today, finally. But just seeing the amount of individuals that clearly have not watched the Nuggets, and I get it, they're a small market team, but still, man, they were obviously the most well-rounded team in the NBA. I remember somebody said, I can't remember who it was, that the toughest opponent we were going to have this whole playoff series was the Phoenix Suns. And that ended up ringing true, man. And yet still, you kept hearing narrative getting spun in favor of first the Lakers and then the Miami Heat, because they're the 2 larger market teams in the NBA. Obviously, for me at least, when I think NBA, I think Los Angeles Lakers. That's the first team that comes to mind. So they obviously wanted that big market team with those big names to win the chip. And despite all of that, the Nuggets were able to fight through all of that outside noise and all of that outside adversity and just completely flush it all down the toilet, man.
You know, and we say it all the time whenever we have the GOAT conversation, or even when we compare, like, to never just kind of like sit back and appreciate the player that he is. Because the thing that is the beautiful thing about Nikola Jokic is he's such a breath of fresh air, because there's really nothing like him. I mean, if you were to clone like 7 players that are former NBA players, it would maybe form Nikola Jokic. But that's just the beautiful thing about it, because you can throw all these guys in. But that's not Nikola Jokic. You'd have to fit someone else in there in your comparison in order for it to be Nikola Jokic. Because I mean, you know, in terms of like the passing, I mean, Magic Johnson was like 6'8", 6'9", and he's maybe the best passing guard that the league had ever seen. And then you see, you know, was it maybe Dirk Nowitzki and the Sombor Shuffle and the way that you're able to, you know, see him create his shot a little bit. You know, that's a little bit of a side of, you know, Nikola Jokic. And so like the thing I always kind of come back to, not comparing, but it sort of like brings me to the point of like Tom Brady in a certain sense, because it's like when Tom Brady played quarterback in the National Football League, right? Like he did it his way. Like he undoubtedly did it his way. And during a handful of stretches of seasons, it didn't look all that pretty. Like, you know, when you're like throwing, you know, the football around, like it didn't look normal, say, to the average person. But then as he's winning games and winning those championships, everybody started to take notice. And that's the thing I think with Nikola Jokic and with the MVP trophies, because it's like maybe the best comparison truly that I've seen is like he truly feels like those pickup basketball players that you think are just not that good, but then you put them on to pick up basketball game and you just can't stop him. Like you throw everything, you throw the kitchen sink at him, and he still makes bucket after bucket or pass after pass after pass. Like he continues to get the job done.
No, yeah, I like that you bring that up because he's like one of those guys you take your first glance at and you're like, he's not gonna ball out. He's not gonna. I mean, he was joking around in an interview. I think this morning was calling him. People were calling him like fat boy, and he kind of responded to that saying like, "Oh, look how the fat boy turned out" or whatever. I just saw this quote from Richard Jefferson. This kind of ties into it. When he was talking about Nikola Jokic's stats, he was like, he's Kevin Durant scoring, he's Magic Johnson assisting, he's Tim Duncan on the glass, and he's shooting a better percentage than a guy like Steph Curry. If you look at all the stats in this postseason run and compare it to all those guys, he's better. And it's absolutely insane because you look at a guy like that and he's not as athletically like as freaky as those guys. He's not as fast as Stephen Curry. He's not as like bulky and some of these other guys are. And he's still putting up better numbers. Like, I don't know how to explain what Nikola Jokic, how he does it. He's basically like got aimbot at this point. And when he gets into the paint, it's like literally, I don't think I can name a single player that has been able to actually like contain Nikola Jokic. And it's kind of insane that he had like his best season yet, and he didn't even win the MVP of the league. That I would like to hear guys' thoughts on that. Like, I still don't know how that feels like it should be investigated, how Joel Embiid managed to win the MVP. Like, I understand he averaged more points per game or whatever, but I mean, who was more valuable to their team? It's pretty obvious who was the better of the two.
Well, it feels like very similarly to the way MVP is judged in the NFL. It's who has the best stats at the end of the day, not who's actually making the biggest contribution to their team, I feel like. So, I mean, I'm a very casual basketball fan, so I can't really speak to this too much, but the way I've seen it in football, it's just, it doesn't matter who actually makes the biggest contribution to their team in terms of just intangibles or actual on the field contributions. If your box score stats are the best, then you're going to be voted more likely than not as the MVP.
It's crazy too, because like players the last 2 years have averaged more points than Nikola Jokic. Yeah, he still won the MVP. But then this year, Embiid isn't having the assists and the rebounds and the winning record and the best seed like Nikola Jokic. Yet he's still going to win MVP. It just seems really, really fishy, to be honest. But it is what it is.
And even with that fishiness, Amir, like, but then you start to hear a lot of MVP voters come out of the woodwork and basically say, "Oh, you know what? I really made a mistake." As far as not voting for Nikola Jokic. So it's just like, hello, like, and so maybe that was like the beautiful thing in disguise in terms of this NBA Finals, is that they were able to beat the Heat, and the one guy who did not have Nikola Jokic in his top 5 of the MVP voting at all was Mark Jackson, who, by the way, is a former Denver Nugget. But that's a topic for another day. But yeah, so there's just something, they're just not used to that style of play. I think truly just in terms of like Nikola Jokic, they just don't know how to grasp it. And I think that it really hasn't been until they, I think, saw this postseason run, which was truly an all-timer. Like, I don't care what people say. Like, you're actually contradicting yourself when you describe the Nuggets playoff run and Nikola Jokic's postseason run, when you say that they dominated everybody, and because they dominated everybody, it's not an all-time run. It's like you're basically contradicting yourself. Like, that's basically that's basically saying that Von Miller went for 2.5 sacks, almost 5 sacks in his Super Bowl run in 2015, and DeMarcus Ware had 3 sacks in that Super Bowl run, but that was not an all-time Super Bowl run. Like, it just doesn't make any sense, and especially considering the way that it was from start to finish, like especially 2015 for that Denver Nuggets team or Denver Broncos team, and then the Denver Nuggets team where they really turned things on in like December. Like, and so it was just a completely different animal. And so it goes to show you the way people truly have viewed Jokic and just this whole Denver Nuggets team.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
But on that note, in terms of the Nuggets, though, the other question that is certainly boding, of course, with this, and that is this dynasty discussion, and that is, and maybe even further along with that, can they do it again?
Bring Brucey B back, and we will definitely do it again. That's all I'm gonna say. Don't think it happens. And I think Christian Braun is a hell of a player, or Christian Brown, excuse me, is a hell of a player, and I think he could definitely step up and fill in that. But if you can keep a guy like Bruce Brown in that same role, and these guys are only improving and getting better, I don't really think anybody can stop us. Like, it really felt like it was like you throw the Bucks in front of us, we're still destroying them. You throw the Warriors in front of them, we're still destroying them. Like those would have been like 6-game series. And it just feels like if you run it back that same roster, unless one of these teams gets like a huge asset, like let's say the Lakers get Kyrie, or the Warriors get, I don't know, some huge star, that would definitely be a huge anchor in that. But I don't know, man. I still really feel like nobody comes close to the Nuggets, even if they let go of Bruce Brown. I really do think they can run it back. It just feels unfair.
Yeah. I mean, again, I'm going to draw parallels to football, thinking about that 2015 Broncos team, who obviously lost several key pieces right out the jump. Peyton Manning, of course, retired. Defensively, they lost guys such as Malik Jackson and Danny Trevathan, who were just absolutely massive contributors on that defensive team. So if the Denver Broncos lost some key contributors, and that obviously hurt them in their chances to run it back. Obviously, the biggest one there being Peyton Manning. But the Nuggets are going to mostly run all of their key contributors back, especially if they can bring Bruce Brown into the fold, who really came into his own in this playoff series. Then I don't see any reason at all why they can't run it back. They play a dynamic team brand of basketball that's really hard to beat. That's very evident in this postseason run. So if they can run it back with the same group of guys and play the same dynamic of basketball that they have been, I see no reason why they can't do it again.
Yeah, and I think it's something we've talked about before, but it's just like, they've grown together, and it's something that you said it, Amir, but it's built, not bought. And that's this Denver Nuggets team, is they're built, not bought. I mean, they brought some players in, but those particular players weren't, a Dame Lillard or, a Kevin Durant or anybody that, jumped ship, if you will, to another team. Not saying maybe forecasting, if you will, for Dame Lillard, but just the idea that I think that like teams have to buy a championship versus build a championship. And frankly, if you look at the Warriors, aside from the Kevin Durant move, that was built and not bought. When you truly look at that Warriors team, pre-Durant. And so I think that the way this Denver Nuggets team and the way that Michael Malone has truly gotten so much better with his coaching year after year after year, and having his team buy in to what it is that he's selling, just will only help that team go that much further. And with the fact that you have a selfless team the way that they do, Bruce Brown may actually take less to truly stay here, like that. And so like, that's the thing. He may not, but like he very well could take less to stay here. Now granted, stay less in the NBA contract world is probably like 15 million, but I mean, but that's like another story for another day anyway. But the way NBA contracts are, but like, I do think there's a possibility that they do have a chance of replicating it in, next year. Can't necessarily say that they will win, but they are going to be the team to beat. Now, we say that now, considering nothing's changed in the offseason, in terms of moves and stuff like that. But the thing that, again, you can't change is the fact that everything that you see there is the way things are currently constructed, and that's not changing.
Yeah, I agree. And you can't always build NBA teams just from the ground up, every single player. Like you're gonna have to, like you say, quote, buy players. And they're not gonna always be the biggest names. Like you look at every team in all sports, like is every team, all their players are drafted and just developed. Like it's almost never like that. And the teams that do that, honestly, are never like truly successful. Like the vets that you have are more often from other teams. Most of them are like really good wing defenders. I know that's how we find some of our good players that contributed well. So it's not always going to be just building it from the ground up. So I think building it, from a very balanced perspective, from the way, Connolly and Calvin Booth built this team and constructed the roster, very excellent job, and they can most certainly run it back this upcoming season.
Absolutely, for sure. And you said it. Yes, Denver Nuggets fans, if you are watching this broadcast, we absolutely should give props to Tim Connolly for creating the team that you currently see. Yes, he's with the Minnesota Timberwolves now, but he deserves the props that he deserves as far as building this team with the way it is currently constructed. And we did mention Calvin Booth a lot earlier, obviously, but yeah, it just goes to show you that, it's okay to just be patient with this whole process and to roll with the players that are just better. I mean, like, because we mentioned and we're joking about Emmanuel Mudiay to Jamal Murray and Yusef Nurkic to Nikola Jokic. Like, there was a point in time where like Nurkic and Jokic were on the floor, and you could easily tell from like the beginning who was the better basketball player between Nurkic and Jokic, and it was just like you knew. And so then to kind of see that unfold, and then Mudiay, who I was really high on, I really liked Emmanuel Mudiay, but that was like a guy like one of those guards that just he had the size, just could never get going, and just he was way too inconsistent. To Jamal Murray, like that shooting, playmaking, scorer who turns out to be a playmaker in terms of like an assist, machine, if you will. So you combat that with Jokic, and you have one more time again a dynamic duo between a point guard and a big man. Like it's just pretty special stuff. But any final thoughts as we're getting ready to round out the 5280 podcast?
I wanted to say something actually about Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler. Really caught me. I got to bring my little notes out here from the presser here, because this was something that I thought was really, really cool that I just kind of want to bring a little impromptu discussion here. So Tim Patrick and KJ Hamler are now living together. KJ Hamler is sort of been taken under the wing by Tim Patrick here. They're working on routines. Tim Patrick's trying to implement a vested, steady routine in KJ Hamler's game. They're working on holding each other accountable. And KJ is really trying to hone in on the mental aspect of his craft this year. So pivoting back to the Broncos real quick before we dip out of here, I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, and if you feel like Tim Patrick bringing in some of that veteran wisdom will help KJ Hamler a little bit. Sorry to completely pivot from our previous topic, but
you're good. Go ahead, Amir.
Yeah, so Tim Patrick, awesome dude. KJ Hamler, awesome dude. We saw this with Garrett Bowles, Calvin Anderson last year. I mentioned that early on my Instagram. They lived together last year as well, and Garrett Bowles is going through the whole leg fracture, and Calvin Anderson being in there, living with him really close to his family and everything. Obviously, he helped. Garrett Bowles being one of his best friends, actually helped him get that 2-year deal, essentially being that lead swing tackle for the Broncos. And I think that'll be huge for Tim Patrick, KJ Hamler, developing that chemistry together, not only on the field but off the field. And I just think it's really important having someone that's gone through the same experience that you went through, being able to be a voice for you. Even though KJ Hamler's younger, he's been through a lot of injuries, and he knows what it's like to fight back and return from those kinds of significant knee injuries, tearing his ACL. So I just feel like he's going to be able to share and offer a lot of advice, and they're only going to get closer. And just that chemistry on the field, building that with Russ, like it's going to go a long way. Like chemistry is just as important in the NFL as it is in the NBA. So I was really, really happy to see that. I want to see these guys get closer.
Ray did ask Amir, and I want to say yes, but he did ask, were you the one that had the interview with Tim Patrick where he said he didn't like watching film?
So that actually wasn't my interview. That was actually Steve Smith's interview, believe it or not. So yeah, I think I mentioned that on my show. I can't remember if not, but yeah, I thought that was really interesting because Steve Smith kind of clowned him a little bit. They're at like a Utah game, and he was basically telling him how he was very, very shocked that he actually like does not watch film, and was telling me he needs to like stop that and like actually get into it because it's pretty damn important if you ask me. But I think if you're it's pretty yeah, it's kind of like insane to think about, considering like we were talking about this on our show earlier today. The dude was putting up consistently like 700 plus yards a season without watching film. Like, are you kidding me? Like, I think he told Steve Smith Sr. that he like watches only film, but like only of like wide receivers, like very little though. And I was just like, that's insane, because you're not even watching like how like defenses, their formations, how they're gonna approach you, attack your offense and all the schemes and everything. And he was still cooking your DB on a weekly basis. Like that's absolutely mind blowing. Imagine what it's gonna be like when he actually starts watching film this offseason.
Yeah, just getting tells on on a defender's leverage and all that kind of stuff, and just being able to read off those kind of little nuances. If he applies those other mental aspects to his game, holy crap, dude.
I just have this picture though, because knowing Sean Payton, like as we know Sean Payton now, he's that detailed oriented, head coach. And so like I could just picture Tim Patrick opening up like in a film session, or worse, he just gets up and walks out of the film session, because he doesn't watch film. And Sean's probably like one of those things like, what are you doing? And then they probably will have to go through this whole teaching lesson of like, oh, I just don't watch film. So I just have this image in the back of my mind of like, what's going to be that conversation if it hasn't happened already, of like, understanding like a player's tendencies and stuff like that between Tim Patrick and Sean Payton, of like, no, I'm sorry, coach, I don't watch I don't watch film, and if I do, it's like it's just of the wide receivers. But yeah, but at least he has
you do now.
Well, it's like, and if he does have at least something positive on the side, it's the fact that he's put up some big numbers using that kind of tendency.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
But in terms of like the injuries though, like it that's, I think, the one thing is like, and it's not just like Tim Patrick, but it's Courtland Sutton as well. And so it's just like you have both of those guys that can feed into KJ Hamler, and but injuries, as we all know, are like fluky things. And so it's just like you can be the most like vocal and supportive team around, say, a guy like a KJ Hamler. It's just injuries just happen, and I'm not saying that it's gonna happen again, but just those are the things that you need that bad luck to run out. And so it's just like it's something that it's just like you just don't want it to happen again, right? And so for KJ, he's just gonna have to have a injury-free season, because if you feel like he's a under the radar like X factor guy that could truly like take that offense to that next step, the way that it needed to be, in the Nathaniel Hackett offense, or the Shermer offense, so yeah, I think that's kind of the hope for of course everybody. Ray asks, if he hasn't, do you think it will put him behind as far as Sean Payton is concerned? So kind of like what we were talking about.
Well, the thing is, I don't think Sean Payton's going to let anybody get away with not watching film. I mean, Sean Payton's going to be on his tail, so he's going to make sure every wide receiver is understanding every little minute detail of these routes and what these defenses are going to be throwing at them in the secondary. So I don't think it's going to be an issue at all. And honestly, I think Tim Patrick is really set up to be probably like beside Jerry Jeudy, like the wide receiver one in this offense. It's going to be a really good mixture between him, Sutton, and Jeudy.
Actually, that's I know we said we're going to round out, but it's at least worth bringing up because this is the wide receiver discussion, and we haven't yet had the conversation. But Courtland Sutton mentioned that speaking of studying wide receivers, but he was mentioned about studying Michael Thomas and the role that Michael Thomas had in the Saints offense. I would imagine, and I'll get your guys' thoughts on this, but I would imagine that would only help his cause within this Sean Payton offense, because you do see that kind of similarities with the way that they are, and especially Sutton and Thomas, the way they can go underneath. And if there's one underrated part of Cortland Sutton's game, it's that he can take a slant route and take it to the house.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely feel like he's going to pay attention to just those nuances of how Michael Thomas won at the line of scrimmage and was able to cook his defenders at the line of scrimmage with just those subtle body movements and the ways he was able to read the leverage of his defender and exploit the leverage of his defender, those kinds of things. Jerry Jeudy talked about that as well. He's been watching Michael Thomas's film since 2017 and has been really, he said that he's one of the guys that he's watched going back to his days at Alabama to get tips on his route running. So Cortland Sutton said he's starting to do the same now. And also he's learning how the timing of the routes match up to the hitching and the footwork of the quarterback in this offense, because that's something that's also important as well, because the quarterback and the wide receiver have to be on the same page in terms of when the quarterback's going to be lined up with him in terms of footwork and when the ball's coming out and all that stuff. So it'll obviously you have to get live bullet reps on the field, but seeing how the timing in the route when Michael Thomas was getting open for Drew Brees, that's going to help out Cortland Sutton as well. Just those ins and outs and nuances of this offense.
Yeah, Cortland Sutton's a really, really, really underrated route runner in the intermediate game. Like, it does not get talked about enough. He is able to create like really good separation in the middle of the field, and even in the perimeter outside the numbers as well. So I'm really excited to see what he can do. Taking these things from Michael Thomas, who had that incredible record-breaking season in 2019. I don't know if you guys caught it, but Sean Payton acknowledged those words in his press conference today. He was saying he was really encouraged that Sutton actually came out and said that. He's really, excited to see, how Cortland Sutton takes a step in terms of what he had produced on the field last year, as to how it's going to look this year. And he really did kind of throw it out there that he does kind of expect to put Cortland Sutton in that, Michael Thomas kind of role in the offense this year. So you can only, be excited for that, because Cortland Sutton, in terms of his build and what he does best, he literally matches like exactly what Michael Thomas is doing there in New Orleans. There's obviously improvements to be made, and he's not really near that Michael Thomas peak yet. But if we can have Jerry Jeudy and Cortland Sutton ball out and have just incredible seasons like that, parallel here in just the first year with Sean Payton, I don't think Broncos fans can ask for much more than that.
No, absolutely not. And and he's just have a healthy wide receiver room if you can for a full season, please. Yeah, please. Well, Amir and Gage, thank you so much for hopping on the 5280 podcast. I'm sure that the people that are chiming in noticed that there's no Glenn Hauser tonight or Mundungus. It is just the three of us. But hey, thank you so much for enjoying the show, chiming in, and talking some Denver Nuggets, talking obviously some Denver Broncos. And Amir, Gage, thank you so much for hopping in. And once you obviously the Twitter handle for Gage is in his description there. But what do you guys got cooking? Gage, Amir, what do you guys got cooking?
Amir?
So obviously writer for Predominantly Orange, releasing articles to try to write an article at least once every 2 days. So got those coming out. Once mini camp's up, I'll have a whole, recap over mandatory mini camp, the biggest news storylines. Literally, if you don't pay attention, tweet and stuff from, the days of mini camp, you just straight up go to the article. You'll find everything there. Do that for all the OTAs, and I'll do it for all our training camp. Also other stuff that comes out. Broncos Avenue podcast is available on all platforms at YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You guys can find it anywhere you guys listen to your podcasts. You can find me at Instagram at Broncos Avenue. That's where this whole thing started. Just hit 20,000 followers. Everybody that supports me over there, I really do appreciate it. And then Twitter, where I'm trying to grow a lot right now. It's just Broncos Ave, Broncos ABE. So I appreciate you having me on the show, Cam. Gage, it's nice meeting you. You guys, make sure you guys run up their social medias as well.
Amir, likewise, great pleasure to meet you. As far as I'm concerned, you can find me on YouTube pretty much every day over on Denver Broncos it. We bring you daily breakdowns, analysis, breaking news, film studies, podcasts, pretty much everything related to our Denver Broncos. Then you can also catch me here on the 5280 pod every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. I am the new full-time fourth co-host on this podcast, so definitely excited for the opportunity that Mike and Glenn and Cam have given me to join this podcast and be able to talk Denver Broncos every single week here. So that's where you guys can find me, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to be on this pod.
We are definitely great to have you, and you'll be an exciting member of the not just the 5280 podcast, but the MHRT Network team. And so I can't wait to do more shows with you, and of course, I can't wait to do more shows and bug the snot out of Amir in our predominantly orange Slack chat that we have. So but thank you guys so much for hopping in with us, and to everybody that once again commented. And if you guys want to subscribe to the MHRT Network, go to the MHRT Network page, click the subscribe button, and thank you guys again for hopping in with us and enjoying another episode of the 5280 podcast.
Even when you feel low, you can still go. Even when you feel slow, you can still go. Even when there's no hope, you can still go. I never answer to no, man, I still go. Go, 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 go.